and let me welcome the panelists. We really wonderful panel, as you said. We really look forward to listening to them. I also welcome all those who have joined us this evening here with us to reflect on what's going on in Pakistan. Before I proceed any further, maybe I'll just would like to tell all our participants, please start putting in your questions into the Q&A box right now, so that we can accumulate them over a period before we go into the question answer session, so that we can keep rolling in the questions as the panel speaks. Second, I would also want to give you a word about how we're going to organize this evening's discussion. We're going to have our three panelists speak for about 12 minutes each, after which we'll have a brief conversation among the panelists. And then we will look at the questions and comments from the audience, and I will moderate the discussion, looking at the questions, summarizing them if need be, and passing them on to the speakers. So really, today we're meeting at a time when Pakistan is really in the middle of a multiple crisis. It's often in India we are deeply affected by what Pakistan does. But it's a pity that we don't pay enough attention to what happens inside Pakistan, its domestic politics, its conflicts, its economic policy. That tends to be somewhat of a black box as far as we are concerned. But hopefully today our panelists will give us some sense of where Pakistan is headed, because I believe, at least, we'll listen to our panelists as well, that Pakistan is really at an inflection point, given the challenges that it faces today. One of the most popular leaders of Pakistan ever, Mr. Imran Khan, has been behind the bars for a few weeks, with no sign that he'll be allowed to come out despite the judiciary's bails, etc. Second, I would say that the army seems quite clearly bent upon playing a larger role. So this is not just an interim arrangement that they've set up and without really calling for elections. So it's entirely possible that the present interim government will continue. And the military is taking more of a hands-on job in running the country, including its economy. The economy itself is in really deep trouble. The IMF package that was agreed to, it's not clear if they have the capacity to implement it. And some of the first steps, like increasing the energy prices, has already produced a backlash within the people. A dollar was run away till 350 Pakistani rupees a few days ago, seems to have come down to 310. Comparison in Bangladesh, taka, you can get 110 taka for a dollar. In India, you can get about 85, 90 Indian rupees. So it tells you somewhat where Pakistan's economy is headed. On Pakistan's security front, of course, the relationship with India are frozen. And despite the hopes for a major victory in Afghanistan after the US withdrew from Afghanistan, the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan is also pretty restive, and there is trouble brewing on that front. And Pakistan's foreign policy, its relationship with the US is not what it was. Its relationship with the Gulf has changed fundamentally, where many Pakistanis look aghast as the Gulf countries have better relations with India today than they have with Pakistan. With China, of course, Pakistan has a steady, solid relationship. But Pakistan is also trying to grapple between US-China tensions, and that generates its own problems. So I think there is a lot to discuss of what's going on in Pakistan. Where will Pakistan go? Can it survive its economic crisis? Are we going to go back into a military rule again? So these are many of the questions, and our panelists are going to really start discussing that. What we'll do is I'll start with Smita Sharma, and then go to Mr. Tilak Devasher, and then go to Ambassador Sharat Sabharwal. So Smita, the floor is yours, maybe about 12 minutes, and then we'll move on.
Thank you so much, Professor Raja Mohan, and it's an honor to be in such an esteemed panel with my fellow panelists, of course, somebody who not only have practiced security, who have been in the region, who have written about it extensively, and there's a lot to pack in. So I'm not going to try and touch upon everything right now. As I start with, what I'm going to do essentially is just talk a little bit about who Imran Khan is and what he represents. I think that's important for us to understand before we go on to talk about a future with or without Imran Khan within Pakistan. And I remember in 2013, I had gone there to cover the elections in Pakistan. It was a very different mood. I have, of course, traveled to Pakistan a dozen odd times covering social, political, legal stories, but it was a different mood. And when our flight landed in Lahore, in fact, the first news that met us was Imran Khan had suffered an accident, that he had suffered a fall from his political rally stage. And so from the airport, I remember, in fact, I was traveling with Suhasini Haider, who was my colleague at that point of time with the TV station. And we ran straight to the Shaukat Khanum Hospital. And there was a sea of people on the way to the hospital, youngsters sitting outside, inside the hospital. And that, in a way, spoke to us that here was a man who had become a political force to reckon with, regardless of what the electoral outcomes were going to be. And that election also stayed with me in my, in terms of its imagery for two particular reasons. One, in 2013, the narrative of Kashmir wasn't actually resonating internally during the elections. All the parties at that point in time had chosen to not go in the usual sort of, hammer and tongs way on Kashmir like they do. And second, that election was focusing on a lot of domestic issues. I remember picking up the national newspapers and looking at the headlines that actually focused on prices of ginger, of essential commodities, of vegetables at that point in time. So why am I mentioning this? Because I think at that point in time, there was a cautious sense of hope that perhaps Pakistani politics, which has been unpredictable and yet predictable because you know that it is always going to go back to its unpredictable ways in strange sort of fashion, that perhaps the roots of democracy were starting to take shape for a change. But when you look at that elections in 2013 and today here we are in 2023, 10 years from now, it looks like things have again gone back to being the same old ways where history keeps repeating itself way too often in Pakistan. Which then brings me to Imran Khan as a political character. Because, all of us, of course, have followed with keen interest, including those of you who have joined in the room. Imran Khan, when he started to grow up, his youth days, they coincided with a time in Pakistan that was undergoing a lot of political upheaval, including, of course, the West versus East Pakistan and the eventual liberation of Bangladesh. He was the charismatic boy, a privileged family background, spent his youth in Pakistan, in Oxford, and then, of course, became this legendary cricketing character, sportsperson, who led his cricket team to victory in 1992 and decided to leave cricket on a high. That's where you see what is reported as a spiritualistic turn in his life. Imran Khan starts to do a lot of philanthropic activities. He starts to focus on the Shaukat Khanum Cancer Specialty Hospital, goes door to door, builds on a campaign, builds on a momentum. Eventually, of course, in later years, he goes on to do a lot of mass-generated projects, whether it's about a university, whether it's a billion trees plantation while he was in government. And in 1996 is when he launched the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, which essentially was about the Pakistan justice movement. He had no seat in the National Assembly. There was less than 1% of a vote share. And it took him a couple of years. It took him almost a decade before, he could finally, in 2002, he won just one seat for himself in the National Assembly. But in 2007 onwards, of course, when you saw the Pervez Musharraf regime start and all the protests take place, that's when he resigned from the National Assembly of Pakistan. It's important to keep these events in mind because when you look at Imran Khan, who he was prior to becoming a prime minister, some of the characters that came about him were that he was passionate, he was determined, he was persistent. He had an idea of politics, which he was using to connect with the masses, who were clearly tired of the dynasty politics of the Bhuttos, the Zardaris, the Sharifs. There was immense political corruption, the constant hobnobbing of the political parties with the army and the establishment. And then, of course, the Pakistan between the coups and the dictatorial regimes of course, presidents and dictators itself. So Imran Khan was being perceived at that point in time as a voice that was not afraid of speaking up, and he was taking up issues that were related to the masses. But he was inflexible. He believed that he could fly solo, that he didn't really have to be in collusion with anybody else to be in power. And if you see, those ideas actually start to change 2011, 2012 onwards, because that's also a time when, on the one hand, Imran Khan realizes that you do need compromises at the end of the day to survive in politics, especially one that is as skewed up in Pakistan. And the establishment perhaps looking at him as a face that could also not only take on the traditional nemesis, the PMLN, the PPP, their top leaders were also in exile at that point in time. And what we do believe is that around 2011-12 is when the ISI started throwing its weight behind Imran Khan. The irony is, of course, that General Faiz Hamid, who was looked upon as a part of that project installation into power, and later on it became that trigger point between General Bajwa and Imran Khan, when Imran Khan did not want to let, in fact, Faiz Hamid go as the ISI chief. This was later on, of course, in 2021. But I do think that when the army was investing in Imran Khan, they also thought that Imran Khan, Pakistan has had a multi-party system. It has had a splintered political system. It's not just been a two-party system. There have been other political parties, regional parties. Of course, many of them have waned off over the years. There was a certain kind of a legitimacy that perhaps Imran Khan was bringing into the political dynamics to showcase to the world that we are a democracy. We are hearing voices of people who have connected with the masses, who have risen up the corridors of power, who are quintessentially the outsiders, who are not really coming in straight away from the political corridors because they are born into political families. And then you have an Imran Khan who wins the election in August of 2018. Of course, he's called as several names, including the blue-eyed boy, the puppet installation. Things were all right till around COVID. Post-COVID, of course, is when the situation starts to unravel, because in 2019, you have a Pakistan which gets into a dollar-starved mode. The US has pulled out its troops from Afghanistan. Its dependency has gone down. The relations start to strain. Professor Raja Mohan mentioned about a lot of the Gulf countries, which actually in the last few years, if you look at the formation of U2I2, if you look at the relations that India has had with the UAE, with the Saudi, these are, of course, related. And one needs to read into all of these relations. On the same time, the three vectors of Pakistan foreign policy, the Allah, the army, and America, the American factor slowly, of course, also starting to see increased dependency on the Chinese factor, at least with China. The Pakistanis know that it's still on their side compared to what Americans, the Americans that they look at, who are, of course, the relations closing in a lot with India on the contrary. So today, if you look at Imran Khan, he has more than 150 cases. And I'm not going to talk about the details of these cases. Many of you have heard about these cases, be it the Cypher case, also published in Intercept, be it the Tosha Khana case, where the High Court actually even suspended his jail term and asked for him to be released, but he was again he ended up being arrested while inside the Attock jail on the Cypher case, on, of course, charges of that Official Secrets Act. And you have an opposition that also thought that because Imran Khan was so not willing to compromise, and Imran Khan, who was seen as having come to power in the first place with the solid backing of the army and the establishment, an opposition that is willing to strike when Imran Khan, of course, they think is weak, and because it gives them a chance to return to power. This is where you see the inherent contradictions that keep repeating themselves in Pakistan. You have political parties that rise to power by opposing the establishment, by speaking out against the army and the ISI. They come to power. Eventually, things start to sour. They are hounded. The prime ministers have been hounded, exiled, assassinated. What has changed, perhaps, is the fact that since 2008, since Musharraf's ouster, we saw that the Pakistan army go into a backseat mode just for perception purposes. I'm not saying that they're not calling the shots, but perhaps what they realized was that the era of coups was over in Pakistan, at least for the near future, that they would be smarter in calling the shots from behind the screen instead of being seen directly on, of course, the wheel itself. And which then is important leading into the questions that we will seek to address in this webinar, and I'm sure the next speakers will also talk about it. I think if you were to ask me today, in the Cypher case, does it look like there was literally a collusion between the United States and the Pakistan establishment to overthrow Imran Khan? I would say the evidence looks shaky and weak. Perhaps Imran Khan overread the power of that theory in trying to sell it as a conspiracy to his audience. Does Imran Khan have sympathy today? Yes, he definitely has. And I think this sympathy will help him if elections were to be held immediately. Does Imran Khan remain popular? I would say he's among the more popular faces of Pakistan, but he's not the most popular face today. Of course, PTI did win 15 out of the 20 seats in the Legislative Assembly to Punjab, that very, very important province in 2022. But if you look at his street power, and I'm going to conclude in just the next 2 minutes itself, what played out on 9th of May, the violence, arson when he was arrested, it wasn't a movement of a civil society nature. It wasn't a Tahrir Square protest. Yes, people came out, but in smaller numbers at different cities targeting military installations. And in the subsequent arrests that followed for Imran Khan in other related cases, you didn't see that kind of violence, arson breakout because of, obviously, there was a high-handed establishment repression from the regime. There was fear of a fallout for people who were taking to the streets. You've had the PTI, in fact, several top leaders either leave the party or quit politics itself, from a Shireen Mazari to a Fawad Chaudhry. And there is also fatigue. So Imran Khan, I would say, remains popular. But if the elections are held in this 90-day time period that we are talking about post-delimitation, that looks difficult as of now, November seems to be ruled out, till February, March, his party will gain. If the elections do get stalled post that, the chances start to look difficult for Imran Khan, because I think the problem is PTI is not a structured unit. While Imran Khan rose up the ranks of politics and he built this cult figure for himself, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf did not give birth to big original leaders. They basically borrowed people from other parties, people like an SM Qureshi, who, if I may say so, has been like a Ramvilas Paswan across all cabinets, except for the fact that, of course, Paswan stayed with his own party, but SM Qureshi has switched loyalties time and again. So structurally, I do find Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf not as stable and strong to be able to carry on with this storm if it continues for long. Imran Khan's popularity as of now, especially in the diaspora, which may still be helping him with money from overseas to fund his party, that continues for the moment beyond February and March. Again, that is something that will take a hit. But the bigger question will also be of, as Hamid Mir, in fact, says, that this is really not a question of Imran Khan's political survival, but a question about the constitutional survival of Pakistan itself, where the important moment to watch will be post 16th September, when you have a new Chief Justice coming into the Supreme Court, Justice Qazi Isa, and what kind of a tone does he take if the elections are not held in time and it is seen upon as a violation of Constitution and Supreme Court. And I'll leave it there with those thoughts.
Thank you, Smita. Not about Imran Khan, but about the very constitutional and the political basis of Pakistan. So a lot to reflect on. Maybe now I'll turn to Mr. Tilak Devasher to give his thoughts on what's happening in Pakistan.
Thank you, Raja. And good evening to all the esteemed panelists and to the participants. Let me begin by trying to recap where Pakistan is at and how it arrived there, and then look at Pakistan's new political direction. A thumbnail sketch of the last 2 years would be that Pakistan confronted what's being called a polycrisis. There was a political crisis with constitutional implications. The president has now got into the act. A judicial crisis and growing confrontation between the judiciary and the legislature and executive. A deepening economic crisis with Pakistan teetering on the brink of a default. The worst climate-induced floods in the country's history. And a resurgence of terrorist violence with trans-border implications that have revived threats to Pakistan's security. All these crises are likely to continue, at least in the short term. Now, these multiple crises have been played out against the backdrop of a completely polarized polity and society, where politics have been even more bitterly contested than before, where political fragmentation and confrontation was not amenable to resolution politically. How dangerous the situation had become was apparent in the remarks of the then Interior Minister Sharat Sabharwal when he said on a TV talk show that Imran Khan had taken the country's politics to a point where only one of the two of them could remain. Thus, rather than seeing other politicians as mere adversaries, a growing number of people described them as enemies and traitors. The mutual respect needed in a democratic polity thus frayed dangerously. The pivot of the political crisis, of course, was the unbridled ambition of Imran Khan to get back into power after he had been removed through the democratic process of a vote of no confidence in the National Assembly. He refused to accept his democratic removal and saw it as a conspiracy. In his desperate quest to get back into power through fresh elections, he deployed a straightforward populist strategy to boycott and discredit the parliament, mobilize the street, and most importantly, social and traditional media to portray himself as a political martyr who had succumbed to a foreign intrigue carried out by domestic collaborators. That this narrative struck a chord was evident when the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf scored victories in several by-elections across the country. The events inevitably moved to the happenings of 9th May. Carried away with his undoubted popular appeal, Imran Khan trained his guns on the generals, but not so much with the intent to correct the civil-military imbalance, but to force them to intervene on his behalf, to get back on the same page narrative. The army brass on its part were, however, concerned about Imran Khan seeking retribution, especially against the new chief of army staff, worried to return to power. The die was thus cast, only one of the two could remain standing. With this background, when we talk about new political direction, I would not write off Imran Khan just yet. Even though he is behind bars and for the moment disqualified from contesting elections, he continues to be central to Pakistani politics, and political uncertainty is likely to continue till at least the general elections, if not beyond. His enduring legacy is that while he was unable to deliver on governance and economic progress, through persistent propaganda, especially on social media, he created the urge for change among millions, especially the youth. His narrative of a corruption-free Pakistan shook their faith in the existing politicians and institutions. This promise of a Naya Pakistan that captured the imagination of the people has been left unfulfilled. These unfulfilled aspirations and the resultant anger, heightened due to a serious deterioration in the living conditions as a result of back-breaking inflation, is palpable and will be disruptive, irrespective of any electoral outcome. The mainstream political parties will therefore have to factor this in and adapt imaginatively to this anger, else instability and disorder will remain beneath the surface. On the economic front, Pakistan is going through one of its worst crises, and this will continue. The key elements of the crisis are external debt repayments that Pakistan cannot meet within its existing foreign exchange reserves, back-breaking inflation, and the steep escalation in energy prices that has resulted in countrywide protests. Though the 9-month $3 billion IMF standby arrangement, or SPA, being approved in the nick of time, will restore short-term stability, there is little doubt that Pakistan will need to enter another fund program to avert default for the longer term. Moody's Investor Service and Fitch Ratings have noted that Pakistan has to repay between $25 to $28 billion in the current fiscal year to meet its debt obligations, while the IMF has projected Pakistan's gross external financing need at a whopping $91.5 billion over a 3-year period starting from fiscal 2023-24 to fiscal 25-26. Such a mammoth requirement of gross financing clearly dictates that Islamabad will have no other option but to go back for another IMF bailout package after the expiry of the existing SPA in March 24. The crux of the problem in Pakistan is that the economy has a woefully narrow tax base. And second, Pakistan consumes much more than it produces, necessitating large doses of foreign exchange for imports. If the grave political and economic challenges were not bad enough, Pakistan is faced with a grim security situation Due to the renewed wave of terrorist violence, with TTP militants striking across KPK, Punjab, Balochistan, and even the national capital. This is likely to continue, if not worsen. Additionally, clashes with the Taliban on the Pak-Afghan border underline the growing security problems. Terrorist incidents in Pakistan soared by almost 80% in the first half of 2023, according to the Pakistan Institute for Conflict and Security Studies. According to it, the number of terrorist attacks in August at 99 was the highest in a single month since November 2014. The TTP has, however, claimed 147 attacks in August. Quite possibly, the western borderlands of Pakistan are now disturbed to such an extent that fixing them would be very challenging. Rather than Pakistan gaining strategic depth in Afghanistan, the Taliban today have strategic depth in Pakistan via the TTP. Beyond these current issues, serious as they are, there are more fundamental issues that confront Pakistan and will haunt it in the years to come. In my first book, Pakistan Quoting the Abyss, I had posed a fundamental question in 2016. I had asked, and I quote, "Is then Pakistan ungovernable, or are its leaders incapable of governing Pakistan?" Unquote. The thrust of my argument were the WEAP factors, an acronym I had coined for water, education, economy, and population. These are the long-term, non-traditional security threats that eat the innards of any country. They take decades to deteriorate and even longer to rectify. I had demonstrated that Pakistan faced an emergency situation in all these areas a decade ago, and by 2016, Pakistan should have been in a disaster management board, but there were no signs that it was. If the question that I had posed then was important, it is critical today, given the multiple crises that Pakistan is faced with and the deterioration in each of the WEAP elements. Pakistan is in danger of becoming, if it hasn't already, the sick man of Asia, just as Turkey was in Europe in the 19th century. There are other elements in the situation, but let me focus on just two. First, the population in the sixth census of 2017 was 207.7 million. It has now, as per the latest census, reached to 241.5 million, an annual growth of 2.55%, one of the highest in the world. The growth rate is even higher than between 98 and 2017, which was 2.37%, and has outpaced the growth rate of food production of about 2%. Pakistan could well be moving towards a Malthusian situation of relative food shortage. Second, there are elements of the situation that would presage a creeping military takeover, either directly or much more direct than in the past. And maybe we can discuss this during the Q&A section. So what are the implications for India? First and foremost, in dealing with a toxic state like Pakistan, India needs to monitor all the elements of the evolving crisis in Pakistan very carefully and wargame best case and worst case scenarios. Second, our analysts and thinkers will have to break out of the mold of conventional wisdom that Pakistan has survived crises before and will survive again. We have to be aware of the fact that Pakistan is entering uncharted waters, and we need to be nimble in our analysis and not be caught by surprise. Third, one thing that concerns me a lot is what would our reaction be if, let's say, 250,000 or more food and water refugees from Sindh and South Punjab start marching towards the Indian border? What would we do? Fourth, taking a cue from what is happening in Pakistan, look at our own parameters, especially of food stocks, of water, foreign debt, political polarization, and so on, and take remedial measures now itself. Fifth, a combination of a hungry Pakistan and a radicalized Pakistan would be an angry Pakistan. It would pose several security challenges against the backdrop of Pak propaganda of the last 70 years that one Pakistani Muslim was better than 10 Indian Hindus and of parity between India and Pakistan. When these people see India progressing, a natural sentiment would be jealousy. We have to guard against the consequences of that. Sixth, the normal Pakistan playbook has been to shoot its way out of domestic problems. Hence, there can be no let-up of the security grid on our borders. The case in point is that since 2019, there has been evidence of Pakistani drones dropping arms, ammunition, IEDs, and drugs in Punjab and J&K. This is a clear indication that the ISI and the Khalistani terrorists in Punjab, Pakistan, are attempting to revive the insurgency in Punjab using narco-terrorism in a big way. There has also been a spurt of Khalistani propaganda activities abroad. Seventh, Pakistan will get even more dependent on China given its economic problems. This would need to be monitored. Finally, given what is happening in Pakistan, it is unlikely that any government there would expend political capital on Indo-Pak relations. Thus, the focus in Indo-Pak relations is likely to be on management of relations rather than on unfreezing the relationship till there is clarity about what is happening in Pakistan. To conclude, the bottom line of the changing dynamics in Pakistan is that it has become a country whose challenges, current and long-term, have perhaps become greater than the capabilities and the capacity of the leadership to tackle them. The current leadership does not seem to have either the vision, the ability, or the courage to do so. Whether or not the multiple crises deepen, or there is some sort of a bailout, is likely to depend less on the caliber of the Pak leadership, civil and military, and more on the generosity of its friends and the IMF, at least temporarily. If, unlike the past, there are no early solutions to the multifarious crises, Pakistan would literally be quick marching towards the abyss. So I'll stop now and look forward to the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Tilak. You talked about the uncharted waters where Pakistan is headed, so we will come back to that in the question answer session. But before I hand over to Sharat, may I just ask our audience to just keep putting in the questions so that we can start addressing them as the panelists finish speaking. So Sharat, the floor is yours. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Raja. We are discussing today beyond Imran Khan, Pakistan's new political direction. And I ask myself whether there is anything new. Actually, it is more of the old. And let me explain why I say that. Imran Khan, the government was called a hybrid regime. Actually, there was nothing hybrid about it. It was the army ruling through him, their blue-eyed boy at that time. When he started resisting them, he fell out with General Bajwa. And then, of course, he was ousted from power. He gained popularity thereafter on an anti-army, anti-US nationalist religious platform, and he thought that he could confront the army. He grossly overplayed his hand there, especially by instigating the violence that followed his arrest in a corruption case on the 9th of May this year, violence against a number of army installations. Now, that gave Asim Munir an opportunity to crack down on him and his party. A number of leaders of his party left him, deserted him. The consequence was that when he was arrested again in early August, in another case, Tosha Khana case, there was not a whimper of protest. Released by the Islamabad High Court, he has been detained in yet another case. So as you said during your introduction also, it seems that the army is bent upon keeping him and his political party out of the political equation, at least till the election. For this, they will use a large number of cases that they have against them. They will also use strong arm tactics that they have always done in these situations. Their task may become easier when there is a change over in the judiciary. The current Chief Justice, who has been seen as being partial to Imran Khan, retires later this month, and he makes way for Qazi Faiz Isa, who is ill-disposed towards Imran Khan because Imran Khan's government had filed a reference against him in the Supreme Judicial Council. What has happened in the recent past is that the sharp political divide and the May 9 events gave an opportunity again to Asim Munir to consolidate his own position and that of the army. And this has been done in a number of ways. First, he dismissed 3 very senior officers of the army, including a Lieutenant General, the former Corps Commander of Lahore. He took disciplinary action against 15 other very senior officers who were seen as being sympathetic to Imran Khan. 2, the Shahbaz Sharif government that was working in tandem with Asim Munir towards the end of its tenure, got some amendments passed to the Official Secrets Act and the Pakistan Army Act, which has strengthened the hands of the army. Inter alia, by giving officials of the intelligence agencies to enter and search a place or search a person without a warrant and confiscate any evidence. 2, making defamation of the army an offense. 3, the business empire of the army, which was already extensive, has been legalized, and its role in the economy of the country has been reinforced by saying that they can work for national development, etc., and raise resources for the welfare of their serving and retired personnel, which was the logic earlier also for the vast business empire they had. But this has been put in the law now. And then their past economic actions of the army have also been legalized. This is because from time to time, the judiciary had objected to specific actions of the army. Asim Munir has repeatedly emphasized the army's role in rebuilding the economy, in stabilizing the economy, and he said that he'll lead in this effort from the front. He recently, as you might have seen, met a large number of businessmen and made a whole lot of promises to them in the economic front, including bringing the retail in the taxation net. Now, this is an army chief for you. The Punjab government has given 45,000 acres of land to the army for corporate farming. And then General Munir, along with the outgoing Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif, launched just before the PDM government laid down office, launched the Special Investment Facilitation Center that it was claimed would facilitate investment of $75 to $100 billion from Gulf countries. Now, the jury is still out on the potential of this council. Let's be very clear about it. Such mirages have been shown to the Pakistani public earlier also, both by political leaders and by military dictators. Indicators which remain weak, the absorption capacity of the economy, which is also low, and law and order situation, etc. And let's not forget that there have been earlier initiatives to promote investment. There was this Pakistan Board of Investment, which was supposed to do this. There was also a National Development Council, which was constituted during Imran Khan's prime ministership, and General Bajwa was included in it. And then, of course, CPEC was presented as a game changer. Now this SIFC is being presented as a game changer. Will it work or not? One has to wait and see. As I said, the jury is still out on that. Above all, Asim Munir has got a caretaker government of his choice. Prime Minister Anwarul Haq Kakar is one of the founders of the Balochistan Awami Party, which was army engineered, and he has been close to the army. The other thing, of course, we must recognize is that though Asim Munir, PMLN, and PPP have worked together so far to meet the Imran Khan challenge, now that challenge has receded somewhat, they are likely to follow their own interests. So for PMLN, it is essential to retain its electoral dominance in Punjab, which sends little more than half the seats of the National Assembly. A difficult task because they have taken most of the flak for the hardship, economic hardship piled on people. Their star vote-getter, Imran Khan, is sitting in London. Nawaz Sharif is sitting in London. He may come back to Pakistan after Qazi Faiz Isa takes over. But I wonder if even he would be able to retrieve the situation for his party. And that's someone like Nawaz Sharif, who has had a lot of influence in Punjab. PPP would like to retain its stronghold of Sindh, but also make gains in its traditional strongholds of Punjab, particularly southern Punjab, where it remained marginalized in the last two elections. The army chief would like to see a hung National Assembly where he can craft a majority of his own choice. The army has had 3 parties, smaller parties, already in its toolkit to do this. They were MQM Pakistan, PMLQ or Chaudhry Shujat Hussain, and Balochistan Awami Party. The army has engineered formation of 2 more parties to accommodate PTI deserters. Istehkam Pakistan of sugar baron Jahangir Tareen, who carries a lot of influence in southern Punjab, and PTI parliamentarians of the former Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Chief Minister and Defense Minister Ruwais Khattak. So they may have in the new Legislative Assembly a presence of small parties to play around with to get a majority of their own choice. There is no certainty regarding the timing of elections, normally due in 90 days from the dissolution of the National Assembly, which would be in early November. But then, as we know, Shahbaz Sharif government hurriedly approved the results of the 2022 electronic census, which necessitates delimitation of constituency. There's some controversy there, but the Election Commission says that is needed. That's a time-consuming process. Second, the Shahbaz Sharif government also passed a law to give some extra powers to the caretaker setup, in addition to their normal remit, which is day-to-day functioning of the administration. Now, this was done on the pretext of giving them the authority to deal more efficiently with the urgent economic issues. But this has also given rise to the apprehension that the caretaker setup backed by the army may stay on for a longish period of time. Some recent reports quote the chief election commissioner as saying that elections would be held by February, but I would await an announcement before I believe that. There are also reports that the Americans have told the Pakistanis to hold free, fair, timely elections. I would like to see how far they go in pressing this demand. Because, for example, would they like to live with a fair election if it means Imran Khan coming back to power? But whatever the timing of the election, it will be a managed affair. Let's be very clear about it. Will result in a government which will be bereft of political legitimacy, dependent on the army, and incapable of dealing effectively with the problems of the economy and terrorism, etc. Tilak has already spoken at some length about the economic problems, but let me also just add that the 9 months, $3 billion latest program is just a temporary breather. It postpones the day of reckoning. Someday, Pakistan will again face the same problems, and sooner than later. As he also mentioned, they have to repay a very large amount of debt. The foreign exchange requirement is huge till 2026. So I wonder if at some stage they may have to seek restructuring of their loans. They cannot do without it, in addition to the IMF programs that they may have to go in for. There is no let-up in terrorism, which is growing, TTP terrorism in particular. Now, latest reports that they have they have built a stronghold in the Chisral region, and the number of terrorist attacks has been growing. So it's going to be an unstable and difficult situation in the foreseeable future. For now, the army is in firm control, and I believe that this situation will continue after the election also. Whichever government is there, it will be heavily dependent on the army. What does it all mean for India? I think 3-4 things. One, we have little leverage over Pakistan's internal developments. And we have dealt with all the governments there, including military dictators, to manage this very difficult relationship. And I think that policy will have to continue. Although, as you said, we should keep a close eye on the developments in Pakistan, because all those developments can impact us. And that brings me to my second point. For now, all that we can do is to keep a close eye on the events in Pakistan, to make sure that the growing instability there does not impact us. 3, any further stabilization of the bilateral relationship beyond the restored ceasefire of February 2021 must await greater clarity on Pakistan's internal dynamics. And then, of course, we have our own elections next year. Next, though army's control has been reinforced by the recent developments. Asim Munir may find it difficult to change the policy of tactical restraint vis-a-vis India adopted by his predecessor, Qamar Javed Bajwa, because Pakistan's complex internal challenges. I'll stop there and come back to some of these issues during question and answer session.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we've really covered a lot of ground. And I thought before going in for to the questions that have come up on the audience, I mean, I thought I'll ask you, just to reflect on, what was said about Imran Khan, as a personality, that it was really though he was a popular cricket captain, he was widely, there was a lot of hero worship around him. But it is really, as some of you said, it's really the army that built him up and put him as a clean alternative to the other political class. So the falling apart that took place over the last, year and a half ago, why do was it a policy difference, or was it just Imran's persona that he thought he was bold enough, or that he was so indispensable that he could take on the army? And then that led to actually, which is in the prison today. So where did he go wrong? I mean, all the history of Pakistan tells you that the army always wins. So for him to have chosen such bold confrontation with the army, so where do you think his calculations went wrong, that you can actually mobilize the masses or play the street against the GHQ? I mean, so maybe Smita, we'll start with you and we'll just go around.
I think some of it has already been covered here by the speakers, Raja. Essentially, I do think that he misread. I think he sort of overplayed his own hand. He did feel that he was in a very, very comfortable position where, the army would have fallen in line when he wanted that a certain ISI chief should continue. Also then, of course, the other case where the ISI director at that point in time, of course, who came and allegedly complained to him about some related stories that were coming in of misconduct in Punjab by his wife and some relatives. So a lot of the personal and professional were getting interplayed. Imran Khan, over the years, what started off as his virtue, which was being that persistent person, being that person who would speak his mind. The problem is you govern in poetry, you campaign in poetry, you govern in prose. I think that governing in prose part, he clearly missed out, especially in a country where you do at the end of the day make compromises. So the confrontational buildup, globally we have seen leaders, and a lot of people will argue that Imran Khan perhaps is a mix of a Donald Trump, of a Bolsonaro, of a Arvind Kejriwal, people who do a lot of street politics, who go to the masses time and again. But the difference is that at times you need to draw the lines between what can lead to anarchy, violence, and also where you are essentially drawing your strength from. Look, I think even if he was an army blue-eyed boy, we have to give him the due for the build-up to the years of how he struggled up all the way from being an outsider to direct politics. And his transformation didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like the army just chose him and made him sit in power. He did work hard for where he was, but reading the mood of the masses, and the masses that are going to come to the streets, and the masses that are going to actually lend you support from overseas or be on social media. These are different things that I think people today and leaders across the world, it's a messaging there which is important for leaders across the world to take note of. Because at the end of the day, your street power will start waning off when you're up against a regime that is going to use the entire tools at the disposal of the establishment. So I do think that his confrontational attitude did stem from misjudgment, from an overconfidence, and perhaps from this idea that people would like to see him taking on the establishment continuously, that people power would give him enough sort of, steam to drive through, even if he was taking on the army.
Tilak, I think in your presentation, you said, it would be unwise to rule him out, that the story has not ended. So what are the potential pathways in which you think he can come back? I think you'll have to unmute yourself.
I'll talk about his coming back, but he continues to be the central figure in Pakistani politics till the elections and beyond. Even though he may be incarcerated, even though he may be disqualified, politics is going to play around him. So to that extent, I said that I don't think we can write him off. But see, basically, I feel he's not a politician. He was never a politician. Politics is art of the possible. He refuses to compromise. He refuses to sit in the same room as the opposition when he was in power, even talk to them. And then he got swept away by his own popularity. And the people convinced him that, he almost felt that he was some kind of god, that he could do no wrong. And then the cult figure that he became, or convinced himself that he was a cult figure, and that he could take on anybody he wanted. Now, two instances. One, this Faiz Hamid, which Smita has talked about. And second, he tried his level best to make sure that Asim Munir doesn't become army chief. He even went to the extent of promising Qamar Javed Bajwa that I'll give you another extension, or postpone the election and let the new government choose the army chief. He didn't want this army, Asim Munir, to be, selected and made army chief by the government. Now, you see, the army has favorite politicians. The army will never allow politicians to have favorite generals. And when they found, this is the Corps Commander's consensus, when they found that, hey, this is a politician who's trying to pick and play generals against each other, and that was the end of him. There is no way that the army as an institution will allow any politician to mess around with their postings, their transfer, or the chain of command. So that's where he ran really foul of the army, and then there is nothing that he could do. And then he's gone out of a limb. Can you imagine calling the serving army chief Amir Jafar or Amir Sadiq and abusing the army left, Dirty Harry, and all kinds of things. This is Pakistan we're talking about. I mean, what did he think? And the people around him also, okay, nahi ji, tusi, you are AXYZ, so you can do what you want. So basically, not being a politician, not willing to compromise, not realizing that politics is the art of the possible, becoming a cult figure who thought he was above the law, above everybody else, and what he wanted. And therefore, you've been removed democratically through a no-confidence motion. Accept it. Come back. Your politics is not over. You can come back. But he refused to believe that anybody could remove him. And therefore, the vehemence of his counterattack. He attacked everybody and calling people traitors, this thing, and talked to religious content, haq par batil ki ladai hai. I am the righteous one. Everybody else is evil. So things like that. And that's where he ran really foul of the army. And I don't see that. You see, all the politicians have run foul of the army. Nawaz Sharif has been out twice, but he's now learnt and he's coming back. PPP, Benazir, Asif Zardari said nasty things about the army, but they're also on the mend. So maybe he'll sit out for 5 years. Of course, age may not be on his side. He's 75. He'll become 75 5 years from now. But I won't sort of write him off to that extent.
I think he made enemies with too many people at the same time, Raja.
Yeah. Okay.
The political class, the judiciary, as well as the army and the establishment.
And the United States, and China, and Gulf. I mean, it's kind of used.
And the Saudis.
Yeah. Leave anyone. Sharat, I mean, I think, there was one question from Ambassador Surendra Kumar. I mean, if you keep him out for too long, I mean, how does it, what happens to the domestic politics? I mean, can it really, whether you disqualify him, I mean, the question was about in Pakistan's democracy. Of course, it's really, we had this, just the two, there was only one clean succession from, Nawaz Sharif to Zardari. But after that, we've really not seen any government lost out. So if he's held down and the army takes a larger and larger role, I mean, where do you see the overall polity going in Pakistan? I mean,
well, the army has always had a very prominent role in running Pakistan's affairs, whether directly or from behind the scenes. Now, they have held other popular leaders. For example, Nawaz Sharif, he was kept out of the country for almost 10 years before he came back. That's where I agree with Tilak. I mean, he's Imran Khan, unless, he's killed, and I don't see that happening. I mean, you can never write off a politician in Pakistan for all times to come. He has had a connect with the people. He was a creation of the army, but he built a connect with the people. He had certain charisma. So even if, for example, he sent into exile, at some stage, he could come back and again be a figure in the Pakistani politics. The foreseeable future, I think the army has decided quite clearly to keep him out of the political equation. And they'll do it by all means. They'll then manage the election There also, as I said, they do not want the outright victory of either one major player or the other, PMLN or PPP. They would like a National Assembly which is fragmented and where they can use the smaller parties to craft a majority of their own choice. But just to comment briefly on Imran Khan, look, he was someone with a lot of charisma because of his cricketing career and so on. He founded his party in 1996. We didn't make it in politics at all, except for one lone seat, which Smita mentioned earlier. He was picked up by the army in 2011. So it was someone with a degree of charisma, a lot of charisma, but not going anywhere in political terms. The army picked him up, and that's when they built him up. And like every other creation of the army, he fell out with them. Every creation of the army has believed at some stage, Nawaz Sharif or Zulfikar Ali Bhutto earlier, he had served with Ayub Khan and Imran Khan, that they can take on the army. If you look at Nawaz Sharif, in 1999, I am told, just before the coup, many people advised him not to enter into a direct confrontation with Musharraf. But he was of the view that he had the support of some generals within the army, which would make him tide over that situation. And he didn't. The problem in Pakistan is why these things don't succeed. One, Imran Khan's was not a democratic revolution. Let's face it. It's been said earlier, he was a creation of the army. He was not fighting for democracy. He was fighting for support of the army to bring him back to power again. Second, there has been no political leader in Pakistan who capable of leading a mass upsurge against the dominance of the army. As I said during my presentation, small groups of Imran Khan supporters attacked a number of army installations in a number of places. It was unprecedented, both the spread and intensity of violence, but it was not a mass upsurge. Let's face it. And that being so, I think there was no chance of his succeeding against the army. And he was a strong-willed person. That was his famous about him, even as captain. And he continued with that strong-willed, attitude towards the army. And then eventually he fell out with the army on certain issues and paid a price for it.
Yeah. No, since we are on, there's another question on the, Saudi Arabia in the past used to bail out, it had given exile to Nawaz Sharif, kept him there for 10 years. So there's some talk. I mean, is there a way the army can, offer him a deal and say, look, we'll give you exile, forget politics, go out and cool your heels for a while. Maybe like Nawaz Sharif, you can come back. But the problem in this case appears to be he also had, blotted his copybook with the Saudis as well. That at one point when he was the PM, he joined hands with Turkey and Malaysia to contest, Saudi leadership of the Islamic world. So in that sense, maybe his relationship with Saudi Arabia has not been good as well. So is there an external, Pakistan always had this external factor, Saudi Arabia coming and, doing things. But is this time, would anybody be interested in salvaging Imran Khan from his prison?
I don't know if any other country would be willing to do so. Saudi Arabia, as you said, the relationship was very difficult in 2019, I think, when he decided to attend an Islamic summit organized by Malaysia. And then the army chief had to go there to retrieve the situation. I also wonder whether the Americans would like to do it. I asked that question, whether they would go to the extent of pushing for a fair election if there is a possibility of Imran Khan coming back to power. The army on its part, I believe, would like him to go into exile at some situation, at some stage. Whichever country is willing to accept him, he's out. He has some potential of creating trouble there, mobilizing supporters, etc., but they will live with it rather than having him at home. But he has to accept also to go into exile. We don't know, whether he would be willing to do so. He has so far, as I said, been very headstrong. He said that I'll stay on here and fight this injustice of the army imposing itself on the country, on political affairs, etc., etc. So we don't know how things will pan out. But what is clear is that even if he doesn't go out anywhere, they'll keep him incarcerated. They'll try and get him disqualified in one of the cases from holding office and rule him out of the political equation, at least till the next election, and then see what to do after that.
Tilak, you want to add anything? We have one of the questioners. I'll come to Smita as well. I mean, no. We're talking about Imran Khan.
For him going to exile, he can go to UK. I mean, the people have offered him, why don't you go to the UK? Nawaz Sharif went to UK, didn't have a deal with the UK government as such. To go to Saudi Arabia, of course, it's a different matter. But it'll go against the grain of everything that he has stood for in his political and sporting career. He's a man who never given up. His determination, which Smita had mentioned, and the perseverance. So if he turns, it'll be seen as fleeing, as running away. I don't think so. He wants that to be his legacy. His sort of, what do you call determination, his obstinacy. So I don't see him actually leaving.
Okay. Smita, briefly, I think there are a lot of questions now.
No, I just wanted to add that I think there are two things. One, Imran Khan's mismanagement during COVID, which started the unraveling phase as Prime Minister, was on economy and on foreign policy. Him landing up in Moscow on the day that Russia decided to invade Ukraine didn't really make for good optics at all. Of course, the chances of him going to UK, but I think the nature of the support that Imran Khan draws from the diaspora is very different. So that's something also that the army would keep in mind and possibly want to keep him in jail till such time. We have to understand that the caretaker government is a 24-member government. It's almost like a full-fledged government by itself. As Maliha Lodhi in a recent article points out, that they've even handed out the portfolios of culture, tourism. So there is every possible indication that you will perhaps try and see this government being in place for way longer than having a real election. And not letting an Imran Khan go off to a foreign soil where perhaps he will grow again larger than life with the kind of support that he has right now. So even if that happens, we'll have to see the cipher case. If Shah Mahmood Qureshi turns an approver, then it's going to become really serious for Imran Khan with possible long-term incarceration that we are looking at.
One of the questions is, look, we're talking about Imran Khan, but it's not about his personal question. I mean, I think it's really linked to, at this point, to the future of Pakistan. And the question of economy, I think it came up. Given where the economy is, the idea that, General Munir now saying he's going to run the economy, they've set up this SFIC where they want to sell actually most assets of Pakistan. I mean, the parts of the Karachi port have been handed over to the Abu Dhabi port company. There is even bigger talk. Saudi Arabia might now step in to give investments to, take in a lot of other assets. Is this really a workable strategy? I mean, just as one of you said, CPEC, they said game changer. Handing over, selling assets will get you money for near-term crisis, but we still don't see a long-term economic strategy to change the macro parameters of Pakistan's economy. Is that a persistent problem historically in Pakistan, that it was hoping that somebody would save them rather than actually develop a national strategy to really restructure the economy? Yeah, Sharat.
Raja, this economic question, I have seen it since the mid-90s. Various promises being made, various schemes being charted out. We'll bring in so much of investment. Those promises have been made earlier. Someone has dug out a paper which was produced in a meeting during the Musharraf era, when they said they would restructure government-owned enterprises, etc., make them profitable, etc., etc. All these promises amount to nothing so long as they remedy the structural problems of the economy. Asim Munir, who is leading the economic fight, it seems at the moment, would he be able or would he be willing to tax the agricultural sector? Would he, more importantly, give up the tax concessions, large tax concessions which are given to the army businesses? Would he be willing to take away the tax concessions of the elites? All these concessions, I believe, amount to about 25% of the revenue which is earned by Pakistan. In addition to that there are many other structural problems. In addition to that is the biggest problem of Pakistan's adversarial posture towards India. That imposes an unbearable burden on the Pakistani economy, especially since the gap is growing now and it's growing very fast. That brings it, these things combined together bring it to a breaking point time and again. So, all these schemes will come and go. How much of investment can come? People will not just sink in their money. They will go by the macroeconomic indicators, whether they can get something out of it, by the absorption capacity, the law and order situation, all these things will count. And this will come and go, these schemes. But what is needed is a structural overhaul of the economy and a radical reorientation of Pakistan's internal and external policies for the economy to stabilize. And that's nowhere in sight.
I want to go to Tilak, and you mentioned in your presentation, what's happening between Pakistan and Afghanistan, that, everyone assumed the withdrawal of American troops, the, return of the Taliban was a big triumph for Pakistan. But Taliban has turned out to be, its own master, and the tension is growing on the boundary, as well as Afghan Taliban seems to be supporting the Pakistani Taliban. So you covered a lot of these. Could you tell us, to viewers what exactly is going on?
Yeah. So, basically when the Taliban walked into Kabul in August 21, it was the culminating glory for Pakistan's policy of 20 years of supporting the Taliban. They felt their security is now taken care of because three objectives would be met. One, the Taliban will recognize the Durand Line. Second, India will be out of Afghanistan. And third, the Taliban will defang the TTP. Now, within a year, all these three didn't work out. And today, instead of euphoria, there is dismay and a lot of frustration. The Taliban have refused to recognize the Durand Line. They didn't do it in the 1990s. They didn't do it now. They are not going to do it. India is back in Kabul. The Taliban want India to restart the program that we were doing. And the Taliban are not going to defang the TTP, simply because when the Taliban wanted security and shelter when the US invaded Afghanistan in 2001, it was the various tribes people in the FATA region who today are part of the TTP. They gave them shelter. So as per Pashtunwali, when the TTP requires a shelter, and they're all Pashtuns, so the Taliban is not going to act violently against the TTP. So they've told Pakistan, it's your problem, you resolve it, we will facilitate peace talks. So twice peace talks have been held, ceasefire and so on and so forth, but the problem is not going to go away. And what is most worrying for Pakistan is that while the Taliban have challenged the Durand Line, which is Pakistan's sovereignty, the TTP is asking for demerger of the FATA from KPK. And they want to have their own version of Sharia, and they now adopted a nationalist line. They have set up provinces in KPK, in Balochistan, even in Punjab, they have 2 provinces. Similarly, what Taliban had done in Afghanistan, shadow governments. So Pakistan actually is faced with a Pashtun pincer, to my mind. And if they don't handle it imaginatively, this could well lead to the feeling or the growing feeling of a larger Pashtun entity encompassing both sides of the Durand Line. That's much in the future, but the seeds are now, and Pakistan really needs to sort it very, very imaginatively. So that is the issue and now the TTP has got the American weapons. They've got night vision, night vision scopes. They've got the latest weaponry, thermal imaging and stuff like that, and they're taking on the Pakistan army. They're really giving them a beating. They've, as Sharat mentioned, Chitral. So we don't know what's actually happening in Chitral, but there apparently a large group of TTP people have gone into Chitral. And Asim Munir and the army chief is busy trying to put tax on the retailers. I tweeted that, is he going to lead from the economy from the front, or what happens to the security situation? What is the army chief supposed to be doing? And just one word on the economy. You see, what is bleeding, one of the things that is bleeding Pakistan's economy are these state-owned enterprises. You have the Pakistan steel mills, you have PIA and a host of others. Musharraf tried to privatize Pakistan steel mills, and he wasn't able to do it because of the objection from the MQM. which were his allies at that time, and from the large number of people. So if anybody they want to invest in Pakistan steel mills, take it over, they will have to guarantee that they can hire and fire whoever they want. Will the PPP allow it? How will they manage that? So it's very easy to say that we have got these 28 projects and we will hang them out, and all the Reko-Dek, the copper mines and stuff like that. But will they actually be able to implement it? So I think it's an uphill task over there.
Smita, I mean, one of the questions, is coming up is, look, what will the US do in the current crisis? It's also a question that Sharat posed. More broadly, in terms of looking from inside Pakistan, shall we say, where is their foreign policy? There was a time when everyone used to praise Pakistan's foreign policy. They were smarter than India. They knew how to play the game. But if you look at the relationship with the US today, even with China, there's been really even there, Imran Khan was critical of the CPEC. The Gulf, where they're hoping to get the money from the Gulf. Where do you see, on the foreign policy front, can they make adjustments while keeping the India thing, not assuming they won't move much on India? What can they do to improve their position, in the conflict between the US and China? In the conflict, there was a talk at one point of normalizing relations with Israel. So does he have any room, Asim Munir, to play the game on the foreign policy front?
I think his clearly the chessboard that he's used to playing on, it's not one that is largely favorable to him at this point in time. The Pakistani foreign policy that you referred to, which a lot of people call smart, for the longest time has been about pointing a gun to their own head and saying that, look, you come with me or I'm going to pull the trigger. The only problem is right now, perhaps that cost of that life is a little less when it comes to especially the US foreign policy at this point in time. For the Americans, there should be no doubt in anybody's mind that while they have their own inward problems to look at, from economy to, of course, they also go into the presidential election modes. But their focus is the Indo-Pacific. That is the theater of conflict for them. Their focus is on China, the India-US bonhomie, a lot of it, not only because of India's rising size in terms of just not the population and market, but also with the US-China equation. What we will increasingly see, I think, is as long as the US-China conflict continues, as long as the India-China conflict stays in place, and you have a situation where today India and China are competing in multilateral forums, they may be seen on the same table, whether it's an BRICS or an SCO, but there is increasing competition. There is conflict at the borders. Today, as we are talking, there is no Xi Jinping who's going to come in for the G20 summit, the first time that he's missing out on a physical, in fact, G20 summit meet. So for them, the equation will really be at this point in time, I think their leverages really lie with countries like China, in trying to reset the ties that have gone wrong. You mentioned about the Imran Khan episode vis-a-vis the Gulf and the West. That's where, of course, they will try and reset the ties as well. But it's not going to be easy because even within Gulf and the West, the situation has changed so much that, the quintessential nature of the OIC countries and the member states, that has undergone a lot of transformation. They may be still principally together on a lot of issues on paper, but internally, with the dynamics changing, with the resetting of ties, whether it's UAE, Israel, or whether it's Saudi looking to diversify their economy beyond their dependency on oil, these equations are playing out. And the fact that the troops are not there in Afghanistan. So I think his space is definitely limited, but I do think that having said so, the Pakistan army is not in a position where they will go back into an active coup state. That's something that I don't think will play out in Pakistan in the short term, in the nearer term, because they would rather still be on the back seat and be calling the shots.
Sharat, you want to chip in on that?
Yeah, just very briefly, first of all, let's recognize that Pakistan's dependence on China is very heavy now. And Chinese are more deeply invested in Pakistan than ever before through the CPEC, which is a strategic route for them. 70% of arms come from China. Then nuclear power plants, 1200 megawatt, 7th plant being set up in Chashma. In various other ways, China has helped them with the nuclear weapons, with the delivery systems and so on. And more importantly, now more and more in the economic sphere. China is used to be very hesitant in parking money in the State Bank of Pakistan to shore up the foreign exchange reserves. Over the last 3-4 years, they have left some deposits there. when restructuring of loan becomes necessary, if and when the Chinese will have to do most of the heavy lifting because a large part of the debt is owed to them. The Pakistanis used to maintain a delicate balance between China and the United States. That's becoming more and more difficult because of the nature of the relationship between the two of them. But I don't believe that the Americans are about to abandon Pakistan for various reasons. One, Pakistan's location. It sits in a very geostrategically important area. Second, the worries, perennial worries of instability in a country with nuclear weapons. Don't forget that the CENTCOM commander has come 3 times to Pakistan over the last 1 year. So there is something going on there, essentially, I think, in connection with counterterrorism in Afghanistan. There were also reports recently, which you might have noticed. I didn't see much of it thereafter, that the Pakistani cabinet quietly approved signing of this communication interoperability and security SISMA with the United States. It was signed earlier in 2005 for 15 years. It had lapsed in 2020. So it's not as if things are static. You might have seen after IMF gave this latest bailout for 9 months, Secretary of State Blinken made a statement saying that they are committed to Pakistan's economic stability, etc., etc. So difficult relationship, but we shouldn't expect them to abandon Pakistan altogether.
Tilak, I think there were a couple of questions from the audience on what's happening in Gilgit-Baltistan, the protests, and you follow this closely. So how do you assess the situation there, and what's exactly happening, the protests, the Shia-Sunni conflict, etc.?
Gilgit-Baltistan has been a community-sensitive area for a long time, and it was a Shia majority area. But the state subject rule was lifted during Bhutto's time, and since then there has been a lot of migration of Sunni population in various districts of Gilgit-Baltistan, and that has altered the ethnic as well as the religious balance, especially the religious balance. Now, the Shia-Sunni divide goes back 1400 years, right? And every time there is a statement made by either the Shias or the Sunnis, the people just flare up. So in the instant case, it was this Shia cleric, Al-Husseini, in a procession during the Mohan procession in Skardu. He sort of criticized, the divide between Shia and Sunnis is that who should have been the successor of the Prophet? Whether the Ali should have been who the Shias believe, and otherwise the Prophet, the Caliphs who the Sunnis believe. So he criticized, with what the Shias normally do is to be critical of that succession. Then the Sunnis took off in Gilgit and other places, and they protested that this FIR should be launched against this man and he should be arrested. And FIR was lodged and he was arrested, and the Shias got into the act. So it is a very tense situation with both communities up in arms. There have been people have been saying, no, we will settle down, and the government has been trying to project. But the fact of the matter is that the Shias, especially in Skardu, have now reached a point, together with the deteriorating economic conditions and the fact that for all these years, their constitutional status is in limbo. They're not a part of Pakistan. They're not a province of Pakistan. And yet, they don't have their own identity, the Shnaft, as they say. So the slogans that were being raised is Kargil, chalo, chalo, Kargil. We forget it. We don't want to go via Punjab. We don't want to go through anywhere else, but open the road to Kargil, and because that is our traditional route. That has been the traditional route of Skardu. Kargil, have been very close in the past when the Maharaja's regime was there. So this is something which is very, I think, dangerous for Pakistan, because the alienation has reached such a pitch. Earlier when anybody talked about India was immediately denounced as a traitor. But now they're openly saying so because they see Kashmir, J&K really progressing well. These compare it with their own conditions, which are very bad. Then the economic conditions in Pakistan are also extremely bad, and inflation is high, electricity bills, and so on and so forth. And Pakistan has done nothing for them. And then you have the Shia-Sunni communal this thing. And so, for all these reasons, it's a very witch's brew. That's why these kind of protests are taking place. And once again, I think Pakistan needs to handle this very carefully. Now, if the TTP is coming into Chitral, and sort of move into this area, they will upset the balance even more. If they start targeting the Shias, it'll become even more volatile than it already is. So that's something to watch out for.
Thanks. I think we're running out of time, and this will be the last round. I got some questions on what do we do. We assume nothing will change. That our ability, I think this is what Sharat said, to influence outcomes there is limited. That is true. But at the same time, what happens there affects us. So in terms of looking ahead, longer term, what is it that we need to? There's one question which asked, should we forget the government and deal with the people of Pakistan? I mean, that's one. Second, if there is the economic crisis there, I mean, they've not always been open to taking support from India or even trading with India. So are there ways in which the current crisis in Pakistan opens some doors for engagement? I'm not talking about friendship or a reconciliation, but there's some way of expand the interface between the two societies. So on the question of Pakistan's restraint, I mean, we've seen since 21 the ceasefire is largely held. So there seems to be some kind of a foundation at least to take it forward. So I just want your final thoughts on this question. I mean, in the end, it's all about finally what does it mean for us. So I'll just start with Smita very quickly. We're beginning to run out of time. So you and then I'll go to Tilak, and then I'll come to Sharat. Yeah.
I think politically for India, the situation, of course, still remains the same. The option remains the same of a wait and watch, because internally the changes have to take place. Somebody asked about that missing sort of a political societal presence in Pakistan. It has grown over the years, but still not been strong enough to be able to take on the army and the might of the establishment. Every now and then there are sparks that you see, a Supreme Court decision here and there, some protests here and there, but not sustained enough to be able to take on the might of that establishment. So that is not changing. But having said that, I think the bigger problem is that also keeping in mind that you also have a nationalist, populist government here within India with its own domestic rhetoric and narrative on Pakistan that sells electorally very, very strong and in a popular fashion. And we have only a few months left coming up for elections. And then in Pakistan, a messed up country where you don't have democracies taking root. So that limits your option of sitting down with democratic leaders across the table. One can only hope that next year we will see, there's a lot of American focus on elections in Bangladesh, a lot of statements being made. The Americans need to really stop with this double standard and also talk about the democracies within Pakistan of how the elections need to take place. Because the one big casualty in all of this has been, I think, the South Asian identity. And the problem that even on an issue like climate change, India and Pakistan are not being able to sit down and talk and be able to talk through policies. So that's not going to unfortunately change anytime soon. We will have to wait and watch, but we'll have to see whether Imran Khan is able to come out of jail or not, and in what fashion the next government comes in, who leads it.
Tilak, yeah.
I agree. There's nothing that we can do to leverage the situation or do anything about the situation. But we need to monitor the situation, as I mentioned, very closely. Unfortunately, you mentioned, Raja, in your opening comments, we don't look at what is happening internally in Pakistan. In fact, there are very few think tanks, I think, in India who look at Pakistan internal. Don't look at Indo-Pak relations or nuclear issue. In fact, even JNU doesn't have a Pakistan Studies Center anymore. I don't know how many universities in India are actually looking at Pakistan So we need to look at Pakistan very, very carefully and be mindful of the blowback that can happen from Pakistan towards us. And if at all, you see, one thing I mean, my own experience tells me that when Pakistan is down, that is the last time or the worst time for them to come to India for any assistance. Eating grass for 1,000-year war is something which we've heard many, many times. So that is something which they can't accept because they believe that they are the inheritors of, the Islamic rule in India and parity with India, and they are equal to India. So they will never ask when they are down and out. So this is the time when they really need Indian help if they want to trade with India. Look at pharmaceuticals. There's a shortage of medicines, critical medicines in Pakistan. Everything is expensive in Pakistan, only if they trade, but they will never ask for it right now. So unless and until they walk the talk and they walk back and they eat their pride, there's nothing that India can do except to monitor the situation very, very carefully and to make sure there is no blowback to India.
Sharat, I mean, you served there twice, both as the Deputy High Commissioner, then as High Commissioner. But somehow for me, this idea that we can't do anything except monitor, I mean, it's helpless in a sense that there's really nothing we can do. I mean, is there, but from your perspective, even, isn't there something that you do, or is best thing is, masterly inactivity is the only strategy we can have and defend your fortress, but avoid stepping out or trying to do anything with them, because even a weakness could actually be more complicated for us. Sometimes somebody might think weakness might open doors, but you might also see weakness makes them harder. So I want you to, longer term, what do we do?
Well, one is let's divide it into two. The immediate, I agree with Tilak and Smita, that because of unsettled conditions in Pakistan and India is going into an electoral cycle, I don't think any major initiatives should be expected. I believe that once there is a government, either an elected government or it becomes clear that the caretaker government is going to stay on for a longish duration, there would be some climb down from Pakistan on a few issues, and we may be able to retrieve some of the things that we lost, trade, etc., etc. But I come to your question, and I have always said that we need to make a distinction between the Pakistani establishment and their ecosystem, which has been creating all the trouble for us, and the Pakistani people. This is explained in great detail in my book, India's Pakistan Conundrum. And the reality is that even though we have little leverage over, very little leverage over what goes on in Pakistan, if we have some sort of engagement going on in Pakistan, we can at least keep in touch. You talked of the people. There is a sizable constituency in Pakistan which sees the futility of the policies that were imposed by the army on them in the past, the misery that those policies have brought, who see a stable relationship with India as something in their own interest, in their own selfish interest, not because they have suddenly come to love India. Now, when we have some degree of engagement, we can keep in touch with these constituencies. At least you get the feedback from them, you can give your message to them. But when there is no engagement between the governments, you get completely cut off from there. So that very little influence that you can have, such as it is also lost. So I think long term, I believe, and I have said it time and again, let's have no illusions about transformation of this relationship. If it comes about, well and good. But at least let's do things which would help us in managing it better. We are talking of, danger coming from there, 250 million people, Tilak said, and that's something which we should be worried about. And yet, even though we cannot do anything, we don't even maintain a minimum engagement to understand things better, to convey our message, to listen to the constituencies, constructive constituencies there. So I think at some stage we have to consider that. But look, terror and talks cannot go together. We know that talks have been going on, talks of some kind. Till the UD attack, I think there were open talks. Then behind the scenes, it is behind the scenes talks that resulted in the restoration of fire, etc., etc. I have no problem with those kind of talks, but a degree of open engagement which offers possibilities, which offers at least an opportunity for us to express our views, what we can do. Pakistan then has to make the choice. Just to give you an example, there is talk of import of sugar from Brazil now.
My God.
They have shortage of sugar, and there was some reports that they'll import it from Brazil. I don't know the situation here, whether we are in a position to export or not. But this is how they hurt themselves. Eventually, they have to make those choices. But we also have to consider and at least admit that we, as the larger country in this region, with a leading role, have to at least manage this difficult relationship. And for that, degree of engagement is required.
Wonderful. We've really run out of time, and I really want to thank all of you, but I'll try and I'm not going to summarize this except say three quick things. Really, the crisis in Pakistan is multidimensional and is deep. And it is up to Pakistan to make some major choices. I mean, what direction it will go, what kind of economy it wants to build, or what kind of neighborhood it wants to deal with. So I think they're at a crossroads. It's not really in our hands, India's hands. That's my third point, to influence what they do. But I think, as all of you said, engagement without expectation, while recognizing that it's not easy to change this relationship. But I think looking at it from a longer term perspective, I mean, really continue to monitor as well as be prepared to engage without expecting any immediate results. So I think that would be a practical, realistic policy, perhaps, to deal with them. But I would also conclude with the thought that we need to pay a lot more attention to what happens inside Pakistan. Well, Pakistan generates a lot of heat in India. I think we've not had enough sources of generating light on the internal politics, on the internal dynamics, and the structural changes that might be unfolding in Pakistan. So we hope that to our audience who stayed with us, I mean, I hope this conversation has helped look at some of those issues. And I want to really conclude by thanking the panelists and also thanking the India International Center for giving us this opportunity to work with them, for the Asia Society Policy Institute, to jointly do these events. We've been doing regular events. Asia Society Policy Institute and the India International Center have been doing at least one public event in almost every month. So we look forward to all of you joining next time. We couldn't do the physical event this time because of G20, but next time, hopefully, all of you would actually join for a physical event at the IS at the center itself. But meanwhile, please join me in thanking our three panelists for the wonderful session that we had. So there is a clapping function that you can do there. Thank you. Have a good evening. Good night.
You too.